So welcome everyone. Today we have Dave Eisenberg, co-founder of Zigg Capital. Thanks for joining us today, Dave.
My pleasure.
Yeah, so I guess to kick us off, it'd be great to have a little bit of an introduction to your professional background and sort of your main role at Zigg Capital, apart from obviously having founded the business.
Sure. So I started my career as an entrepreneur. I spent 12 years in startups, 6 broadly in the retail space, 2 companies, one called Bonobos, another called Telepart. Both ended up being acquired by public companies. Bonobos was bought by Walmart, Telepart was bought by Twitter. And then I spent 6 months kind of studying the real estate industry because I had thought it had been underpenetrated by technology, and I started a company called Floored after doing an entrepreneur in residency at the venture firm Excel Partners. And Floored grew to be about 50 or 60 people, and then we were acquired by CBRE, and I spent 2 years in the sort of VP of innovation role for CBRE globally. After my time at CBRE, I founded Zigg. Really, the thesis behind Zigg was that there needed to be a sector-focused venture firm that had a penchant for deep technology businesses. And that's really where we've started and have started to make our name. We've had 2 funds since our founding in 2018. Our debut fund was $108 million. And our second fund, which we closed in December of 2020, is 225. I'm one of 2 partners at the firm. We're a team of 4, and I tend to lead a lot of our investment outreach. I sit on several boards inside the company, and I sort of head many of the firm's activities, especially a lot of the external facing stuff. So things like this podcast. But we're based in New York, but we invest globally. Actually, just this morning, we announced our first European deal, a really exciting AI-based business called Nodes and Links. And we've got 2 companies in South America, and then the heavy bulk of them are in the United States.
Yeah, that's awesome. You guys must be incredibly busy with such a small team and such a large portfolio. But thanks for that introduction. I guess we obviously work with a number of early stage prop tech companies, some of which, as you know, are in the portfolio. And I think it's always interesting for people to understand sort of the sort of ethos of, or the thesis of where you invest and why. So it'd be interesting to understand a bit about some of the companies you've invested in to date, and perhaps you mentioned that second fund that is, significantly larger. Does that, to some extent, change the way or the stage at which you're investing now?
Yeah, we have several active theses, although to be honest, a lot of the investments that we make end up being reactive to hearing a new idea or meeting an entrepreneur that we've never met before and feel compelled by. In general, I would say one of the themes that we're most actively investing against is automating manual processes in real estate, construction, retail, and then the financial services that touch many of those. Many of our biggest investments, I think, can be mapped back to this thesis. Companies like SnapDocs, Spruce, Juniper Square, all of these companies share, even Nodes and Links are one of our newest investments, share this desire to use AI or machine learning to actually make efficiencies within the industry. Our business OpenSpace.ai in the construction space certainly fits this theme as well. Stage-wise, we do cross-stage periodically. So one of our largest investments of the last 12 months was leading the Series C of Spruce in the States. But I would say our dominant focus is still early-stage investing. That can mean different things to different people, but in general, I'd say we're better fits for sort of businesses that are raising, $1 million or more. Some of the really small sort of pre-seed stuff, we tend to wait for a little bit more traction, although once in a while we'll certainly make exceptions there. And then a lot of what we do, I would describe as institutional seed or sort of Series A investments. So those can range from rounds that are 1 to 4 million at the seed to Series A's that are 5 to 15 million. With this newest fund, we have the handful of opportunities to pursue later stage investments. So we've allocated some of our resources to making 2 to 3 later stage bets. And those tend to be with entrepreneurs that we know exceptionally well and have gotten to know over several years. And And that's been a new and interesting thing to add to our toolkit.
Yeah, and I just saw that one of the companies that you've just invested in, is it Tomo? His
Tomo, yeah.
yeah, it's the third largest seed round ever in the US, according to Crunchbase, 70 million, which is pretty mad. So that's
Yeah.
exciting. It'll be interesting to see.
Tomo is a highly unusual case because the founding team was so credentialed. The CEO was the former president of Zillow, who was there for 11 years. His co-founder was a key VP at the company. Many of the early hires they brought in are just of a more senior tier than what you would typically find. So the 70 million was done in sort of two pieces, and the second piece was a later stage firm who came in and just wanted to make effectively an early stage bet out of a much larger fund, and so that's how you end up with a very large seed. The way that they're going to market is also a bit unusual. It's not my story to tell, so I'll let them tell it. But they have a very novel distribution strategy, and that strategy is also part of the reason why the initial fundraise was so much larger than your typical business.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to see more about them in the press, and I'm sure lots of people will be talking about them, especially after something like that.
It's an amazing team that is tackling a hugely ambitious idea of trying to reinvent mortgage, so we're really excited to be on the ride.
Yeah, awesome. And so I guess a good segue onto next question is how do you go about evaluating potential portfolio companies? There are so many out there, and everyone seems to have the next best idea. What are some of the, I guess, tools that you use or often look at to try and sort of evaluate these portfolio companies?
Sure. So we spend a lot of time with the founding teams. I think we try to calibrate the teams that we're looking at to the best teams that we've seen in the category over the last decade, and try to get a sense for where we think they stand out. We have a framework that we use that measures, called the MATE framework, the magnetism of the founders to both capital and people, authenticity of the founders to the company that they're building, their tenacity, and then their ability to evolve in the event that a fundamental assumption is something that they have to change or pivot. So after we, I think, have sort of qualified that the team is of a certain bar that we would then back, we spend a lot of time looking at the market. One of the things that we're a little bit cautious of in prop tech generally are those businesses that can start out of the gate relatively quickly, maybe get a few brand name customers, but then the depth of that market is a little bit lacking. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about what the true addressable market is for a business. I'd say the biggest flaw that we see in real estate tech pitches is probably people citing the size of the real estate industry as their market size. I think in reality, it tends to be far, far more segmented than that. And so that's probably the next biggest activity that we take on is sort of evaluating the true market size. And then finally, I think we spend a lot of time looking at the digital product. One of the things that we're trying to assess is how fast is that digital product team moving. It often helps to have a technical person on the founding team. And then we try to calibrate how good is this product versus everything else that we've seen in the category, including incumbents and what offerings they may have in the market.
Yeah. Well, plenty of tips in there for anyone that's listening, planning on pitching Dave in the coming months. And I guess moving away from sort of the portfolio side of things, we work with a number of candidates who are always interested getting into sort of the VC space. I think that you've obviously gone down an interesting route that you worked at or founded a number of companies that that then got bought, and that's sort of your route, having been a founder yourself. What would be your advice to candidates who are potentially thinking about that VC route as an option?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in spending a little bit of time at least working for a very high growth technology company that's VC backed. This way you do a few things. You learn what it's like to be a part of a portfolio company, and you also build a new network. You build a network of all of the employees who work at that company, as well as the investors often who have backed that business. And I think if you do a great job at that company, people will start to recommend you. They'll recommend you for higher and more, more senior positions. And then if you network with a lot of VCs, you may find yourself on the receiving end of an offer for someone who believes that you've got a lot, domain expertise in that area. So VC probably has outsized influence for how many people it employs. It's not a huge industry by headcount. And so the single best tip, I think, for how to get into VC if you're not currently in it and you'd like to be, is just to affiliate yourself with some very high quality organizations, and then to use that as a way to network with some of the people that you'd like to work with in the future.
Yeah, it's definitely a pretty tight-knit crew, and I think, as you said, getting that exposure to start the startup world is definitely a stepping stone. And to close us off, what are some of your key objectives, I guess, for the rest of 2021?
Let's see, for the rest of the year, I think making sure that whatever we are returning to, I think in the fall, has benefited as much as possible from some lessons that I think we took away from COVID. There are a bunch of our companies who are going to use the next few months to figure out if they want to be working fully remotely in a hybrid session. Some are going fully back to the office. As a small firm, we've gone fully back to the office. And that's been very productive for us. But I am very interested to see how the sort of blend of choices that are made by our portfolio and by prospective portfolio companies. And then we have a handful of companies that have either decided to go public or are in the process of going public. And I think spending quite a lot of time analyzing their businesses, figuring out what we want to do in the public markets will be a big chunk of our time. And then finally, just building a whole new pipeline. I think that the post-COVID world, knock on wood, that's what we're looking at in the fall, is going to have a bunch of new opportunities in PropTech. Real estate will be reinvented faster than it would have been before. And I think hopefully we'll spend a bunch of time with some new early stage investments that we'll make.
Yeah. It sounds like you've got your work cut out. Perhaps not the quiet summer that maybe people were hoping on. That's awesome. But thanks for joining us today, Dave.
Sure.
Really incredible hearing about Zigg Capital.
My pleasure, and thank you for having me.
Awesome.